Live from Las Vegas, Nevada, welcome to the Virtual Light broadcast at lightworker.com. Today is Saturday, January 25th, 2014, and this is segment number 3. Please welcome Janelle Collard and Dr. Stephen Farmer.
Hey. Welcome back to segment 3. Dr. Stephen Farmer is a world-renowned author, teacher, shamanic practitioner, licensed psychotherapist, and soul healer. He's published several best-selling books and other products, including Earth Magic Oracle Cards, Spirit Animal Guides, Sacred Ceremony, Power Animal Oracle Cards, Messages from Your Animal Spirit Guides Oracle Cards, Power Animals. He's got several guided meditation CDs. He's got several different oracle books that we'll be looking at here later. And he's also got a pocket guide to spirit animals, which I love. You gave me one of those. Dr. Farmer offers private consultations for shamanic soul healing and intuitive earth magic and power animal readings in person or remotely by phone or by Skype. He makes his home in Dana Point, California, with his lovely wife, Jessica, and his 2 stepdaughters, Serena and Ariana. His website is earthmagic.net. So welcome to the show.
Thank you, Janelle. Appreciate it.
You are a busy writer. My God. I mean, I couldn't even read off half of those. There's so many books and
I'm very
CDs.
impressed, actually, as I hear that, because I forget. You know?
It's like, is that me?
I go, really? And I'm in the midst right now of yet another book that is a whole different avenue of basically my assignment. It's on healing ancestral karma, so we could talk about that later, too.
I'd be very interested in that.
Yeah.
Well, first explain to me how, I know you are a licensed psychotherapist, and you basically retired from that and then decided to go shaman. I mean, how does that work?
I woke up one day and said, I want to be a shaman. No, not quite. No, it was a gradual, like many of these things, I think they're gradual. It really wasn't a splash. It was almost a natural outgrowth of doing psychotherapy for so many years. I was introduced to it the first time by a fellow that came to a Toastmasters group.
Really? Okay.
Who I thought was really weird looking. And he's now a friend, a longtime friend and a colleague, but at that time, Toastmasters, you know, suit and tie and the whole bit. Newport Beach, California. Jade Wa'u is his name, Wa'u Grigori. Comes in and he's got a leather jacket with some things on it. He's got a Fu Manchu mustache and he's Mongolian and holding a feather. And I thought, okay, this is getting a little weird. But at the same time, I was so intrigued by it.
Really?
Yeah, I went, oh, this is interesting. There was another part of me that I think it was just beginning to emerge.
Sure.
And basically went to a ceremony that he facilitated, met some other people, got to know Jade a little bit, and I was so drawn to it at that time that the next event was to take an initial course, which many, many people have taken through the Foundation for Shamanic Studies. Michael Harner, who was doing this work in the Amazon basin back in the late 50s, early 60s, and has made it his assignment to teach as many people as possible who are drawn to this. To learn some very, very basic universal processes. It's not Native American, it's not African, it's not Celtic, it's really, there's universal processes that we find in a lot of indigenous shamanic cultures. Example would be inducing the shamanic state of consciousness through drumming, rattling, dancing, plant medicine, any number of ways where you can enter into an alternate reality called non-ordinary reality,
right.
A term coined by Carlos Castaneda. And there you work with helping spirits for guidance, healing, etc., to bring back to the tribe or the community. So that really drew, it spoke to me. And I think it's, I heard something recently said, if you follow your calling, you'll never work another day in your life.
I like that.
You know, and so I was really called to it. Psychotherapy, I think, has its value, but I was beginning to feel a bit stifled, you know, by some of the restrictions that are inherent in a state in something like psychotherapy, which has the rules and regulations, which is fine. And I was a different sort of therapist anyway, and I did do some shamanic, well, sacred ceremony, which is one of my books. I did sacred ceremony with a couple of groups that I ran. Didn't introduce it as shamanism particularly, but ceremony, and it was amazing. Again, I could go story after story,
well,
but
I could see that your background in psychotherapy, though, would be a great marriage between the two.
Yeah.
You know, in my opinion. Well, let me ask you about shamanism, because it always fascinates me. And you know, you took some classes, but you hear a lot of people talk about like, it seems like a catchphrase anymore. It's kind of a sexy word.
Right.
Now we have shamanic yoga and shamanic astrology, and
Yeah.
are those sexy catchphrases, or is shamanism
shamanic
expanding?
cooking shows. And, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and shamanism is going
Well,
into
we
the
have
underworld.
we have a habit, I think, in our culture, and as wonderful as it is in many aspects. But one of the things in our New Age metaphysical arena is we find something like that, and we'll tend to gobble it up and
Right.
and sort of keep it at a certain, I would say, surface level. And so it has become a bit of a catchphrase these days. In traditional times, in old times, excuse me, in old times, you know, there was quite a process to go through. You
Right.
didn't become a shaman. Again, it was a calling. I do not think or announce myself as a shaman. That's, to me, it's up to the community. Do
you have a card that says
It's just
shaman?
a
I
word.
mean-
Yeah, it says anytime, you know, 24/7. Call me, we'll take care of your soul retrieval, anything else. No, nothing like that. But a shamanic healer, shamanic practitioner, soul
yeah.
healer, those kind of phrases I think are ones I am comfortable with, because, again, it's not up to me. I've done a lot of work with it. I've done a lot of journeys. I've done a lot of preparation. I continue to learn. I continue to grow in that arena. But I think what it does speak, because it has become so attractive in our culture, is the hunger that so many of us feel for a more intimate relationship with the earth. And that's
Right.
really a lot of what, it's not the only thing, but it's a lot of what shamanic work is about, is getting reconnected to the earth. We have forgotten our intimate association. We have rooms like this, which is really wonderful. Flip on a switch, it's light. But we lost something in the process.
Our connection to the earth. Well, you talk about that in your book, Earth Magic, which I love that book.
Thank you.
And it was that you said about waking up from the cultural trance.
It's a great phrase. I can't take credit for it.
I
But
like that too.
Yeah, I may have picked it up somewhere. But yeah, awakening from the cultural trance. And I think we are. I think everybody here in the audience, everybody who watches this show, our own version, our own calling, our own path. Was it Lydia that talked about the Camino, walking the path? It was like, what a spiritual pilgrimage
Phenomenal.
that is. There's different paths we have, but we're all seeking that, not just that connection to God or spirit. You know, I think that there's disciplines that can work in that direction, but to find God or spirit in everything, in all. And I mean the animals, the trees, the plants, to recognize that spirit or God, and I use those interchangeably, spirit is emanating or expressing as all of these different beings, including you.
Right.
You are spirit.
I'm so spiritual.
Expressing as Janelle. I am spirit
Right.
expressing as Stephen. That tree is tree expressing as that tree, that particular
Well, you
tree.
call that core shamanism, don't you?
That is a term, yeah, that actually comes from the foundation, core or universal shamanism, where the essence of it is to learn the shamanic journey. That's really the foundation. Lots of ways to journey. There's a few ways, I should say, to journey. I was in a training for Tibetan shamanism, and the induction of the shamanic state of trance was the facilitator had this costume on and bells and was rattling and chanting and dancing and everything, and it worked. You know, those of us who were in the training, you know, definitely went into that altered state in order to journey. The journey itself, however that happens, whether, again, it's drumming, rattling, dancing, chanting, plant medicine sometimes can be effective in that. The Amazon basin,
Right.
You've all heard, I'm sure, Amazon basin is ayahuasca. It's a brew that's made there.
Sure.
That's used in that culture. But in some fashion, to induce that altered state of consciousness, to send my consciousness, some say soul, but to send my consciousness into non-ordinary reality. And there I travel in my consciousness to my helping spirits. And I have a certain intention. Maybe I need help with a client. I don't know what to do with this client. What's the best treatment? What's the best medicine to use for this client? I go to one of my power animals. Raven is one of the 4 of my consultants, I call them. I go to Raven, for instance, and I seek help. You know, how can I best help Janelle in this session, in a treatment session? And I get information, I bring that back, or divination. I go to a spirit guide in non-ordinary reality, and there I have a question, I ask that question, I bring it back, and then I convey it to the client. It's a remarkable, remarkable process. And speaking of ancestors, all of us who are drawn to shamanism have a shamanic or a shaman ancestry of some sort. Every one of us have ancestors that lived in a culture where the shaman was the go-to person.
Right.
That's the one you go to for, he was a psychiatrist, the herbalist, the doctor, et cetera, the seer, all of these things in one, because that's the way we lived then.
Right.
Now we got specialists. As a shamanic practitioner, I might suggest a massage therapy for somebody. I might suggest you need to go to a Western medical doctor for this sort of thing. So to incorporate that spiritual approach, that particular approach for healing with other kind of healing modalities, I think is the way it is these days.
Well, I like the flexibility of it, but something that's, when you talk about the non-ordinary realities, you said there's 3 worlds: the upper worlds, the lower worlds, and the middle world. Well, is it kind of scary in there? I mean, if you go in the underworld, I don't even like the sound of that. But can you go in there and then maybe bring a hitchhiker back? I mean,
well, let's take one thing at a time. Underworld is often, that comes from a lot of our own, well, let's put it bluntly, Christian mythos.
Yeah.
You know, as well as others, is that underworld, well, that's Hades or hell or something like that. You're going to go to hell. No. That's mixing paradigms. You know, it's like trying to learn one dance while you're learning another. You learn the first dance, and then you go learn this dance, okay? So we have a lot of that sort of religious overlay that tends to deny the body, deny the natural world, deny Mother Earth. You know, what do we do here on this planet? We live the best life we can, so what? Fill in the blank. So we can go to, anybody? Heaven. Las Vegas. Or that's
such a tourist, right?
That's the underworld right there.
Yeah, exactly.
Or something. I don't know. I think God bless you people for doing this, and Steve and Barbara for bringing soul to Las Vegas, because Jessica and I were talking about that. Is something's missing. You know, it's fun. I'm here. You know, and we're playing. A couple extra days, but. Anyway, that's a whole
Well, I suggest that you get off the strip and go into some of our more beautiful areas like Red Rock, and there's a lot of vortexes.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure. You know, this is a fun trip, though. So, but anyway, in addition to our doing this, so the underworld, or sometimes called the lower world or the underworld, is a whole different paradigm. So it's like, let's go to the blackboard and erase the old stuff for a while, and let me tell you about what in this paradigm, what lower world or underworld.
So what's under there?
Yeah, there's 3 worlds. Lower world, I call it the lower world. Some shamanic practitioners call it the underworld. That's okay. Lower world, middle world, and upper world. The lower world is when you travel and you do the shamanic journey, however you induce the shamanic state of consciousness to send your consciousness there, tends to be, you find it by someplace going down. It could be a rabbit hole, it could be a tree trunk, you could go down, it could be a cave, it could be a body of water, but you go down, and typically you go through a tunnel, and then you end up in an area that looks very much like the natural world. There's a famous story that, if in a sense, is sort of an underworld journey, and it's Alice in Wonderland.
Right.
You know, where the animals talk, there's communication going on.
That's when you've done the plant medicine, right?
Well, Lewis B. Carroll, I think, had something going on. You know. Anyway, so that's one area, and what you tend to find there is spirit animals.
Okay.
You know, typically not human-looking or human-type spirit guides. Those are spirit animals there. The middle world is this world. Let's say my sister Susan in Minnesota is ailing in the hospital. I may ask my spirit guide, one of my spirit guides, let's say Raven again, please go and take good care of Susan. You know, do a little bit more than that. Not quite so glibly, but do a little bit more than that. But basically work in the middle world, or do a middle world journey, which is to take my consciousness to my sister Susan. Okay, that's middle world. The upper world, or sometimes called the celestial, is where human-looking spirits preside. Ancestors, archangels, ascended masters. One of my favorites, Merlin.
Really?
Yeah, I visit Merlin from time to time, and he looks just like Richard Harris.
Just like you think.
I swear he does. That's maybe my cultural imprint.
That's funny.
But, I do go see him from time to time. My primary human-looking spirit guide, who does shapeshift, but typically shows up as a Native American, long gray hair, etc., looks older. He's an old one, an ancestor, long ago ancestral spirit, primal. He lives there.
Now, do you know when you go into these, do you know which world you're going to go into, or
Yeah,
do you just
oh,
follow
yeah.
the smoke? And
Well, typically, I like going to the lower world. I just favor that. It's not, some people favor the upper world.
Sure.
It doesn't really
Just your
matter,
comfort.
but I'll get a hunch, or a hit, and I go, okay, upper world, this is an upper world journey. Or I'll say to Raven and Wolf, who are the two spirit guides when I travel, let's go to the lower world, and Raven will go, no, we're going to the upper world today. Hang on, here we go.
Okay.
The upper world you access through something that goes up naturally. Where I go is a place called Bluebird Beach in Laguna Beach, and there happens to be, when I show up there in consciousness, a rainbow. So I go up the rainbow, and typically you go through a membrane, and then you're in the upper world. It looks a little more ethereal than the lower world. You're on top of the clouds. There's this one avenue I go to see this main spirit guide that I sometimes call Grandfather. I go over this way, and the castle's there with Merlin. And the more you go, the more areas you might discover. People are turned on to it. There's more and more people called to this for that reason, because of all these incredible earth changes that are taking place. And being able to work with what I sometimes would call the magic of the earth, being able to communicate with tree spirit.
right.
I had a healing from tree spirit. I wrote about in Earth Magic.
Yes, that was very interesting.
Yeah, wasn't it?
It was very interesting. Well, let me ask you this. You say that in your book that all healing is from, or all illness has a spiritual cause to it. And so we have soul loss, loss of power, and spiritual intrusions. Now, I've heard that you can sell your soul, but how do you lose your soul?
It's a really good question. Those three areas are, you could say, fundamental shamanic healing. Soul loss. Some shamans will have a different paradigm. My friend Jade, who I mentioned, he talks about the lower world, middle world, and upper world soul. I have a different take on it from my training. And that is the soul can fragment, like a piece of you leaves. And I think everybody here probably knows or has that experience of, psychologically, you would call it dissociation. Where you feel, I was in a car accident many, many years ago, and I remember that kind of feeling of being out of body. Okay? Well, it's very likely that a part of me left, not just psychologically, but my soul chipped off a little bit.
Due to trauma?
Yes, due to trauma,
Okay.
typically due to trauma. There's other ways, but that's probably the most common way. And I also remember when that piece came back in, when it was safe. But sometimes what happens, especially it seems like children, because they're a little more vulnerable and don't have the resources that we do as adults, is that part may chip off and basically go, I ain't going back there.
Exactly.
That's not
pretty.
It ain't going to happen. I'm going to hang out here for a while until they get some sense and this culture starts getting the gist with shamanism and find a shamanic practitioner. But basically my job then is I do not determine. Let's say my client comes to me in a personal consultation. I do not determine and say, oh, okay, you had trauma when you were 8 years old, your mother died or something like that. I would think that would be the one to go to, right, logically. But
Right.
that's my left brain, logical brain. Instead, what I do is I first go journey. I speak with my consultants, Raven and Wolf, and I say exactly this. I say, please take me to the soul piece that most needs to be returned. I have enough experience, I've done hundreds of soul retrievals, to trust my guides,
Sure.
spirit guides, that they're going to take me there. Short story, I'll give you one short story. There's several, but one comes to mind is I was taken to a woman, I was a 31-year-old woman I was working with. I was taken to, with that same thing, please take me to the soul piece, go to the lower world. And they take me there, and here's the visual metaphor, was a little girl, 5 years old, under the bed, playing with toy soldiers. Now, my logical mind, forgive me, but girls don't play with toy
No,
soldiers.
we don't.
No, they play with Barbie dolls, right?
Right.
Okay, that's my stuff, okay. But I went, and this is really a part of it too, is once with enough experience, it's like, you go with it.
Gotta
Just
trust
like
what you're seeing,
Steve, who's going to, channels, he just goes with it. Anybody who does any kind of mediumship, you go with it. You got
Stay
to
out of the
report.
way, right.
Doesn't matter. You can't be concerned about how the person's going to react. But okay, there's that 1% of me that's going, oh, okay, we'll see. Bring it back. I did some negotiating with her, basically that, and this is a part of soul retrieval too, is to negotiate with the soul fragment. Say, what do you want from the client? And this particular part of her said, I want her to go get some toy soldiers and play with them so that there can be a corrective experience. The next question was, why did you leave? And we usually think trauma, right? Yes. Why did you leave? Because nobody was there.
Aww.
Yeah. Yes, I often very moved by these kind of things,
Yeah.
of course. Bring her back, did a process to reattach her to the soul body of this 31-year-old woman. And I said, here's the story. I told her the story. Found this 5-year-old under the bed playing with toy soldiers. She says, yeah, that's what I used to do.
Wow.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Which is validation.
Right.
Second, I said, nobody was there. She says, no, my mother was checked out. So it wasn't literally that her mother had died or gone away, but her
Right.
mother was just not available to her for whatever reason.
Which happens to so many of us.
So neglect, you could say. That's
Emotional
sort of,
neglect.
emotional neglect like that could be a source of a soul fragmentation.
So she needed her little girl back.
Yeah,
Her little
and
girl self.
she went out and she got the toy soldiers, and there was a healing. The healing usually happens over maybe about a 3 to 6 week process. It's kind of like a suture
Integrate.
that needs to heal and to integrate. So that's soul retrieval.
Well, what about psychic intrusions? And also, people can throw curses at you. And
Yeah, the other treatment is called shamanic extraction, and that's how would I say, that's a trip in itself.
Yeah.
Because what has to happen first is the diagnosis. What is this client who comes to me? What's the treatment? Again, I don't decide, but with the assistance and really guidance of my spirit guides, through a process I can feel where there's an energetic or psychic intrusion. Example, how many times have we gone to the mall at Christmas time, 3 hours, go home, wiped out?
right.
More often than not, you're maybe picking up some, you could call it psychic lint, And so there's other clearing processes you can use. You don't have to go to see a shaman to get cleared of this. There's a simple process where you take your shoes off and stand outside and ask Earth Mother, to help receive any of the dust. I have people pour imaginary water through their soul body, etc. That's a short version, but basically that's what it is. It kind of helps clear out some of the stuff you get from the mall. Now, there's other things that are a little more powerful. When something is said in rage, let's say if there's somebody here and I go into a full-on rage to them and I just send energy, and we all know that. We
Sure.
all hear, everybody here and everybody listening to this, knows what that's like, is to feel someone else's energy. I remember in a psychotherapy session before I went full-time shamanic healer, because of a stupid mistake on my part, which was basically this woman and her husband and her daughter, his stepdaughter, had come in for counseling. She was in with her daughter and asked me to keep a confidence, something about grades in school. It wasn't anything terrible, but it was about grades in school. And I stupidly, I still kick myself today, obviously, with the two of them there, the mom and dad, said something, because she said, don't tell my husband, which is a trap that
Right.
can happen in therapy.
Triangle there.
In family therapy, yes, exactly. I let loose. I as soon as the words are out of my mouth, I said something I wanted to go. Have you ever done
Never
that? Where you say something and you want to
Yes.
bring the words back in. Oh, it's too late. She stood up, eyes on fire, and just
could you?
laid
Yeah.
into me. How could you do it? I physically felt something go into my gut. Fortunately, I knew what to do. Now, the problem with something like that is if I just went, oh, that was a tough session. 3 weeks later, I'm getting, problems with my stomach. That's what your question earlier. How can, there's a spiritual cost to every illness, mental, emotional, physical. I'm a believer, I'm beyond belief. I know that's true. The job is to determine what that is to the best of our capability.
Sure.
So anyway, I went and got treatment. I called a shamanic colleague right away, and she did a shamanic extraction, which is to go and do the diagnosis and take this out and then send it along either to Grandmother Ocean or to bury it, to let the wind carry it to Grandmother Ocean, something like that, where it can then be transformed to Mother Earth, to Grandmother Ocean. It's not toxic. It's something to go like, oh, okay, let me take care of that. Unlike, some of the chemical toxins that we might face.
Well, so that woman who did that, and we're running out of time, and I have so many questions. I have too many questions. Would she be giving away a piece of her soul to you, or
the healer?
No, the woman who threw that at you.
No, not necessarily.
Is that fragmenting
just an
her soul
energy.
at all?
It's possible she was carrying something, and
Tag, you got it now.
there you got some of what I'm carrying because.
Wow. Well, I wanted to ask you because we're running out of time, and I really wanted to talk about some animals. And what is the difference between, or is there a difference between a power animal and like an animal totem?
Yeah, and briefly, because I know we are short on time, is animal spirit guides. Any animal that comes to you, 25 words or less, this is a formula, but it's one that works. Any animal that comes to you in an unusual way or repeatedly, and I go by threes, but repeatedly. Any animal that comes to you in an unusual way or repeatedly is an animal spirit guide. That could be the animal itself, or it could be a symbol of the animal, like a dream or a movie or something like that, especially if you get repetition. That's an animal spirit guide. There's a message there. There's a few ways you can find out. One is you can check my website out. There's products, animal spirit guide book you mentioned, pocket guide to spirit animals, the cards. You can find resources on the internet to discover what's the meaning, what's the message from this particular spirit guide. Totem animal is one of two kinds. One is totem tends to be a spirit animal that's shared by a community, a tribe, a village, a family, whatever it may be. Second meaning of totem is I keep totems or figurines on my altar in my home office. I have
fetishes?
Yeah, well, fetishes could be a totem animal. So it's a representation of some sort of a favored spirit animal. Power animal is a whole different deal. It really comes from shamanism, but over the years as I've taught this and done my own work, I realized everybody's got a power animal. That's just a very intimate relationship with a spirit animal. You can determine that by maybe an animal you've loved for many, many years, you've been fond of. If elephant has been with you, and you've just really endeared, etc., an elephant shows up as stuffed animals that somebody brings you, etc., then it's likely that's your power animal. The other is to ask spirit or God, what's my power animal, and wait and see who shows up.
Or do one of your guided meditation CDs that I know you help people to find.
Yeah, you could do that. You could pull from the blatant commercialism, power animal cards.
Which you can find all these on your website.
You can find it, earthmagic.net. There's articles galore there that can teach more about some of the subjects we've been talking about. And again, I'm really excited about this next book on ancestors too, because that's a whole other avenue of shamanism that it isn't exclusive to shamanism.
And you expect that out when?
The fall. I don't have a definite date, but the fall. I've got to finish it in the next few weeks.
It's still rumbling around inside there?
Oh, it's working me. Yeah, they say down south, somewhere down south, they don't say, how you doing? They go, hey, what's working you?
What's
learning you? And it's definitely working me and learning me.
That's funny. Well, I'll look forward to that because I really did like Earth Magic. And when you were talking about the power animals, you said that every person is born with a power animal.
Yes. We lose track of them. And it's like sitting around, that card game where you throw them in the hat. It's been years since I've played that, but they're sitting around going like this, waiting, gosh, I wish they'd pay attention to me. I don't know what's going on. So around the age of reason, about 7, 8 years old, because we don't have the support for it here, often they leave. Good news is you can get them back, or you can change over time. Maybe someone new. Owl used to be very prominent in my realm of consultants, typically 3 or 4 at a time. as a psychotherapist, it's perfect. Why? Owl's medicine.
Right.
Sees into the shadows, the darkness, etc. Wisdom, you know, calling on ancient wisdom. Raven came in because Raven's more the magician
Right.
and the manifester. So Raven's been with me for about 7, 8 years now. And Owl's like shows up in the backseat of the car once in a while, but basically isn't my main power animal.
And you can have more than one power animal, obviously, because you say you have several that you deal with.
Yeah, we're not looking for 122 power animals.
Right.
You know, it's. I would say once you determine your power animal, who your power animal is, get to know them. You know, the next 2, 3, 4 years, you really get to know them. Talk to them. Go into meditation. If you don't know how to journey, do a meditation with them. Be of service to the animals in some way. I donate a portion of my royalties for 3 of my books now to various organizations: Oceana, Defenders of Wildlife, and the Humane Society of the United States, to name 3.
Yeah, I really like that idea, is, you know, give back and support. Well, how do you know if an animal, I know there's so many different things that animals can do. Like you said that sometimes you can get messages from deceased loved ones through animals.
Oh, absolutely.
So what does that look like?
Well, a friend of mine, her father died, and she goes down to walk on the beach in Laguna Beach, and she notices as she's walking, very unusual, a lone dolphin is tracking her. And she intuitively just knew that that was a message from her father. Doves appear. You know, Grandma always loved doves, and after the funeral, I get chills when I'm talking about this, you know, you go out to your porch and there sits a dove. And you just know, because of your intuition and your connection to grandmother's spirit and her as an ancestor, that dove was sent from her. I don't believe that they necessarily, in our culture at least, are the actual person, but they are a courier. In Hawaii, whole different story. The ancestors will show up in various forms, including spirit animals, and they are not representing the ancestor, they are the ancestor. Pueo, the Hawaiian owl, for instance. If that's your aumakua, which is like equivalent sort of to the power animal, you know that's an ancestor that's watching out for you.
Wow.
Very cool. That's a whole other, yeah.
That's a whole other show, too.
Read my book, Ancestors, yeah.
Well, we will have you back for that book, because I think that's just fascinating. And thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you, Janelle. It's a
I
pleasure.
really want to encourage people to go to his website, because there's so much information there, and you're really going to want to read Earth Magic. I loved, and it's really about teaching people all about core shamanism and how we can work on it ourselves.
Yeah.
And I think then you also do healings, and people can contact you to have sessions.
Right, private consultations, phone or otherwise, remote healing as well as remote readings. I've got a number of workshops coming up starting after I finish my book.
Excellent.
At the end of March, Austin and Florida and a few other places. And you can go to my website, earthmagic.net, sign up for a newsletter that comes out once a month. Jessica puts it together. She's not only my wife, but my business manager. And it'll give you my schedule. I don't share, just so you know, I don't share my mailing list. I've been asked several times.
That would be bad shaman, right?
Yeah, just not, you know, I made a promise.
Yeah,
and I keep my
good.
promises as best I can. I keep my promises, and I do on that one, because
well,
it's important.
we all
Integrity is
respect
important.
that and appreciate that. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Janelle.
That's all the time that we have for today, so stick around, and Sandy Sedgbear is going to be back with some more Virtual Light broadcasts.
Thanks.
That was fun.
Bye.